Hi, I'm Andre Faust. What was the buzz this week across Canada? Well, it was Don Cherry. Well, what did Don Cherry do? Well, so terrible. I mean, I really didn't know who he really was until this week. I knew him as the owner of a franchise bar restaurant that back in the 80s I used to frequent quite a bit. Outside of that, I didn't know anything of him, but of course now I know a little bit more about him. But here was a quote that he went and said, and actually I was speaking to a good friend of mine, and he told me that I did make an error in the quote originally. So of course I went back and verified, and I think I pulled the right quote out. Cherry goes to say, "You people, you love our way of life. You love our milk and honey. At least you can pay a couple bucks for a poppy." Okay, now if you would have replaced the words "our," because that's the word really that got him in trouble, with "yours," it would have had a whole different meaning. I'll read it with the replacement word. "You people, you love your way of life. You love your milk and honey. At least you can buy a couple. You can spend a couple bucks for a poppy." That gives it a whole different context. So now now that I'm focused on Don Cherry, I'm starting to look at things a little more closer. I realized that he's 85, so I started doing the math in my head. At 85, that means he was born in 1934. World War II was declared in 1939, which would have made Cherry 5 years old, and the war ended in 1945, which Cherry would have been 11 years old. So that's in his memory. He remembers the celebrations. He remembers the veterans coming back as heroes. He remembers all of that, and he also remembers the atrocities of that particular war. Well, World War I was no better, but World War II is what would have been in his mind. Now, people say, "Well, geez, he was only 11 years old." Well, when I was 6 years old, I remember Diefenbaker. And I remember Lester Pearson. They were the prime ministers of Canada. And I remember being a kid looking at a picture of a former Prime Minister Diefenbaker, and thinking that he looked like a bulldog because he had these long jowls on each side and his face was wide. And that was my impression of Diefenbaker. Now, I was 6, 7 years old at the time, right? So that's in my mind. I'm 65 years old. The other things that comes out of that is that in my collection, I remember Vietnam and I remember Cambodia. Those aren't history data fragments for me. Those are events that I lived through. And those veterans, when they came back, they were totally seen differently, seen in a different light than the World War II veterans. They fought an American bullshit war, and my generation protested that to ad nauseum, to where we effectively ended getting that war stopped. And there was some sacrifice. I also lived through the civil rights movement, so that's in my memory, and very well, and I'm very emotional about that, and that's why I fight for human rights and why I'm a member of the CCLA, because those are things that I've lived through. But the veterans of Vietnam, when they came home, they didn't get the fanfare and all the the glory that the World War II veterans did. No. They were loathed, and they were really looked down as at the bottom of the ladder. So things was not good for Vietnam veterans. And when I wear a poppy, I don't wear it for those wars. I wear it for World War I and World War II, because that's where the real sacrifices were made for our, what we call democracy. So going back again, I understand Don Cherry. So I'm not going to say much more about that. It's there's another component to it, and that's the chill effect. His canning by Sportscast or SportsNet, whatever it's called, that creates a chill effect, and that affects anyone who's an activist, who speaks up, speaks what they feel, what their true feelings are. That discourages that, and they've been a lot of people, sacked, and I'm going to look at here locally. There was Cleary, that was sacked for her stand against fracking. Chamberlain, Ron Chamberlain, professor at the forestry school, canned for his position on glyphosate. The executive director, I think Redwood, got canned because he supported Cumberland. Then we have Charles LeBlanc, blogger, journalist, and he went through hell for the last 10, 15 years. A very outspoken person of the community, a whistleblower. He turned the Fredericton City Police against him when he video recorded the beating down at the Sweetwaters. That created a lot of problems for Charles. He was arrested, thrown in jail, falsely accused to his internet service provider that he was exploiting children for sexual purposes. That was the reason that the Fredericton City Police gave to be able to get access to his internet records. He spent a couple days down in Black River Road, provincial jail. All kinds of unpleasantness. Was accosted by two plainclothes RCMP from Edmundston around the legislature. He went through hell. But I'm going to finish this off on a positive note with Charles LeBlanc. Out of all the years and his stubbornness and tenacity, that he didn't cave in. He kept the battle going, and one of the issues that he was fighting very much about was when inmates are incarcerated at the provincial jail, they, at the end of their sentence, are basically, the door is open, get the heck out. And there was one case out of the Miramichi, a young girl, told, how to beat the feet, there's the road, type of thing. And anyway, the positive note is that he finally convinced the current government to change the rules. Now, inmates that are discharged from the provincial jail will be given transportation back to the place where they were sentenced. And I may be wrong, but it may be back to anywhere that equals the distance to where they were sentenced on. So I commend Charles for his efforts and sacrifices that he made for fighting for those issues, and I also commend the current government for changing the rules, and hopefully we're going to still see that progress. But again, with all Charles's success, we all know what he had to go through, and most of us, will not speak out because we'll either fear a job loss, or if we're looking for work, we fear that we may not be able to get employment. So that chill effect is a very powerful controlling mechanism that is used. So I'll end on that. Till next time, this is Andre. Have a good one.